I got it to fit perfectly. Do this for all 4 back bolts of the transmission pan. On there. I'm just going to tilt it and slowly, and we're going to start pouring this in there. Today I'm doing a service on my transmission for my 2018 Ram 3500 with the Aisin transmission. Now at 30,000 miles you're supposed to just do a drain and fill of the fluid. Then at 60,000 miles you're supposed to do a drain and fill and replace the transmission filter. So that's what I'm doing today. We are at about 70,000 miles, so I'm a little bit over, but I'm going to go through the procedure. The main thing I want to say in this video is that don't be intimidated by this procedure. It's going to cost me about $300 in parts and supplies, and the dealership wanted $650 or more. They said it could actually be more if they used more labor. They were charging 2.5 hours of labor. Think about tackling this project yourself. Save yourself a few $100s, and get yourself familiar with your truck. This is a Ram 3500, but I'm sure this procedure is very similar on all the diesel trucks out there as far as maintenance for your transmission. But this is specifically for my 2018 Ram 3500 turbo diesel with the Aisin transmission. So I'm going to go over some of the supplies that I had to get and some of the tools that I'm going to use. So first of all, you're going to need a transmission filter, and here is the transmission filter. This is the 68224232 filter. This is the actual Mopar branded filter. I recommend sticking with Mopar for your warranty. Also going to need a new transmission pan gasket. This is also a Mopar. This was about $80. This was $35. In addition to that, of course, you're going to need fluid. So I have 3 gallons of this ASRC transmission fluid. This is what Dodge recommends using. There's a couple of other alternatives out there. There's a Mobile 13309 that other people have used, but I'm going to stick with what Mopar is recommending. In addition to that, I had to get a basin. I didn't carry one of these around with me, and this is a 20 quart basin, so it should have plenty of fluid. I'm expecting 8 to 9 quarts of fluid to come out of there. The other thing I got is this special funnel. The thing I like about this is you can fill the funnel. It has a little valve here at the bottom. When you're ready, you can turn the release and it allows the fluid to go into the dipstick tube. It also has this extension that goes on here that can fit into different sizes of dipstick tubes. But I've already checked this one will fit in there nicely. So this way I can dial in, put in 1 quart at a time, release it, and count my fluid going in to make sure that I have it accurately done. I also picked up this graduated little bucket. I want to measure after I've collected it all in my basin here. I'm going to pour it into here a couple of quarts at a time and measure exactly how much fluid I took out of the transmission, so I know exactly how much fluid to put back into the transmission. For tools, first of all, I need a 90mm socket for the drain plug. I need a 10mm socket for all the pan screws. There's 20 screws altogether, and they take this 10mm. There's 4 at the back that are going to be tough, so I've got this extension with a wobble on it that will really help me get that angle around the cross member under the bottom, because you got to get between the cross member and the pan to get at those bolts. So I got that wobble in there. And then I also just got a regular 10mm, and that will be for the other pan bolts and for the 3 bolts that hold on the filter inside the transmission pan. I also have 2 torque wrenches, one that does inch-pounds for the 10mm nuts and one that does foot-pounds for the drain bolt. One other tool that I devised during this project was a simple piece of vinyl tubing, which is 1/2 inch outer diameter and 3/8 inner diameter, and I got it to fit perfectly over the 10mm bolts. That really helped in extracting the bolt from between the cross member and the transmission pan, and also helped put it back in. This, without this little stupid device, it would have made this project much more difficult. Did a little bit of prep underneath to be ready for this. I had some cardboard from some packages that we got, so I laid down that just in case we get some drips. I don't want to get it on the pavement here. And then I've got a little cushion for my head, and of course for YouTube, we got all my camera equipment set up in there. But the other thing is that even though there's lots of room under here, to work and do this project, I ended up putting it up on a couple of boards there just to give me a little bit extra space. Mostly I need that extra space because of filming, and but most people will not need to jack up the truck. These things are pretty high already, so there's plenty of space in there to get the basin in there, do the drain, and put the pan back on. We got a 19mm socket here, and we're just going to loosen this. It actually loosened pretty easily. Okay, ready, set. Okay, there we go. You can see it's pretty, it's a little dark. Okay, here we got the fluid going in there. You can see. I think it took about 5 to 10 minutes for it to drain, but then I gave it an extra 15 minutes just to let every drop out of this transmission. The gasket has an orientation. You can see the little tab sticking out of here. This is the driver's side front corner. So I got to remember when I reinstall the new gasket that this little tab is in that front left corner of the pan. But I'm just going to put this back in for right now. That should keep it from just hand tighten that. So I got my regular 10mm socket here, and we're going to loosen all these bolts first. I'm loosening the first 16 bolts by hand here. I could have used power to make it a lot faster, but I like to feel how stiff each bolt is. Okay, all there is loose. Now we're going to work on these 4 tough ones that are on the back here. Okay, now we're doing the wobble bolts, we'll call them. We're looking at a blown up view of the transmission pan. Here's the drain nut, here's the back of the pan, and 3 of the 4 bolts in the back of the pan. This is the cross member that goes across the truck that blocks the view of these nuts. Now there are small divots created in the pan to try to make it a little easier to get to those nuts, but it's still very difficult. What you have to do is bring the socket in here from this side, get it over the nut, and then back the nut off. But if you back the nut off too far, the socket and the nut get jammed up against the cross member here, and then you can't remove either one of them. So what we're going to do, instead of backing it up all the way, we're just going to back it up 1 or 2 turns, get it nice and loose, and then we're going to take a piece of plastic tubing, push it over the top of the nut, and then spin the plastic tubing to back out the nut, and then retrieve the nut through this little hole right here. Here are some photos of the tubing that I used. It's a 10-foot section. I got it from Home Depot. It's the Everbuilt brand. It's 1/2 inch outer diameter, 3/8 inner diameter. I just happen to have it around from a plumbing project from the RV. Slide it in. This time I think I'm just going to loosen it just to the point where it's loose. Like that. And then pull the socket out. That's the trick. Only do it a couple of turns. Then push the tube over. Then push the tube over. Then spin the tube. There we go. I got the tube over top of it. We're spinning it, and then oops, there comes it off right there. Okay, good. Here's another view of one of the nuts being backed out with the tubing, captured in the tubing, and pulling it out. See, that worked pretty good. Fit perfectly on there, and it allowed me to spin it like that. And that's the trick right there. Slide the socket in from the side, loosen it just enough so that the tubing can spin it. Pull the socket out from the side again. Push the tubing firmly over the head of the screw and start to spin it. When you feel the screw release, pull it out through the gap in the pan. It completely saves this procedure. Stupid little piece of friggin' tubing. Do this for all 4 back bolts of the transmission pan. I use a 10mm socket and extension and some power to spin off the remaining bolts. I leave 2 bolts to hold the pan in place, 1 at each end. I reposition my drain pan underneath to make sure I catch any fluid when I drop the pan. And then I feel to see how heavy it's going to be. Let's do it with power. Okay, there's that one. And we're going to hold it up with one hand and pull out the other one. Okay, now we're going to very, very carefully lift this down. And I want to make sure it doesn't tilt, because there is a load of friggin' fluid still in there. I'm just going to tilt it and carefully let that fluid fall into there. It's amazing. Oh, there's my dipstick right there. That's hilarious. Look at that. Here are the 1, 2, 3 bolts that we have to take off for the transmission filter. I just use a 10mm socket on an extension and power to spin them off quickly. I put them in my magnetic bolt dish to keep them clean and secure. Okay, here's the trick. When you pull this down, fluid is going to come out of, I think, right here. Slowly. Oh, there we go. Good. Slowly let it drain. I'm letting it off really slowly. Good. It's just pouring through there. Good. Tilt that into there. Okay, good. We're going to let this drip for a minute. Okay, we've got a rag here. And we're just going to wipe this off a little bit. I carefully clean the area where the new gasket is going to interface with the transmission. The pan to the transmission here, and here's the gasket. And you can see that that corner with the tab was in this corner right here, the front driver's side corner. So first of all, I'm going to take this excess fluid that was still in the pan, pour that off into there. Get these little magnets, and they're like covered with this like sludge. You can see if you look at it, you can see this like metallic sludge on there. And so what I'm going to do is pull all those 4 magnets off and then clean the pan. I take the 4 magnets out of the bottom of the pan and clean them thoroughly and set them aside. I also do a thorough cleaning of the pan itself, just with the rag, wiping it down, making sure I get all the residue that was sitting at the bottom of the pan. I also use a rag to make sure I thoroughly clean the gasket surface on the pan. I also pull out the drain plug and clean it and get it ready to torque back in. I take the 4 cleaned magnets and replace them on the bottom of the pan on the little indented sections designed for them. I inspect the drain bolt and crush washer and reinsert it into the bottom of the pan. I use a 19mm socket and a torque wrench and torque down the drain bolt to 22 Newton meters or 16 foot-pounds. I kept my new filter inside the package to keep it clean before I was ready to install it. Then I take a little bit of oil from the transmission and rub it on the O-ring so that it will slip easily into the port. And then this baby's just going to pop right back. Let's see what I should pop in there easier than that. Make sure I got that nice and lubed. It's not going in as easy as I thought it would. got it in. Took some pushing, I'll tell you that. After I pressed the filter into place, I inspected my screws to make sure that they were still clean. Then I hand tightened them into the 3 positions on the filter. I want to make sure it didn't cross thread them. I attached my 10mm socket to my torque wrench and then set it to 10 Newton meters or 88 inch-pounds. Then I torque each of the 3 filter bolts. I position the pan on a couple of blocks underneath the transmission. Then I place the gasket in the correct orientation with the corner tab facing the front driver's side. I lift up the pan and stick the back against the crossbeam at the back of the transmission. I use a few more blocks to support the front of the pan. I keep adding blocks of wood under the pan to help me align the first screw in through the gasket. I want to start with 1 bolt at the front of the pan and 1 bolt at the back of the pan just to get it into place. I make sure the gasket and pan and transmission are aligned correctly, then I loosely place the first bolt. Now with the front bolt pan in, it's much easier to put in the back bolt in the opposite corner. I look at all the pan bolt holes and making sure that the gasket is lining up correctly. I also look closely at the 4 bolt holes at the back that are going to be difficult to place. I loosely place a few more bolts around the pan to support it. Now we're going to use the plastic tube to replace the 4 rear bolts at the pan where it is really tight against the cross member. So my idea is to put this on here like this, and then put this up in there. Okay. What we're going to do is we're just going to screw that in there and see if they can get that started. Let's see if that's starting. And I think it is. Can you see that? I hope you can see that. Okay, let's see if that one went in. And that one's in. Okay. Let's try it again. This is the second bolt going in. Just push the head of the bolt into the plastic tubing. Then position the bolt over the hole and kind of push it back and forth till you feel it gets inside the hole. Then start spinning the tubing until you feel the screw grab. Continue spinning the tube until you feel it have increased resistance like the tube is spinning over the head of the nut, and then pull off the plastic tube. Use the same procedure for the 3rd and 4th bolt with the plastic tubing. Now that I have the 4 rear most difficult bolts in, I'm going to loosely place the remaining bolts with my driver here. I'm not impacting these in, I'm just snugging them down so that I can later tighten them up manually with a manual driver, ratchet driver, and a torque wrench. I went back and forth from one side of the pan to the other to try to make contact with the gasket as evenly as possible. Okay, now we're going to tighten all the bolts to 7 Newton meters, so I'm just going to move this down from 10 down to 7. I'm going to start torquing these. I'm going to snug them all first. I'm not even going to do... I snug down all the bolts except for the back bolts, which I'll do separately. Because the gap to access the back bolts is so narrow, you have to bring the ratchet in from the side over each nut and then tighten and then slide down to the next nut. I torque down each of the back 4 bolts one at a time, 7 Newton meters each. I torqued the remaining nuts all to 7 Newton meters, then went around and torqued them all again just to make sure they were tightened properly. Okay, thank goodness I'm all done with underneath the truck. I got my drain bolt torqued. I've got all 20 of the 10mm nuts torqued to 7 Newton meters. Inside the drain pan, I have the filter torque to 10 Newton meters. So it's all sealed nice and tight. I made sure that the gasket was in place all the way around. So let's go ahead and see how much fluid we took out and put it back in the transmission. Now that I got the pan back on, I'm gonna check, see how much fluid I had come out. I'm gonna start pouring in 2 quarts at a time into the bucket. Right at the 2 quart mark right there, that's 2 quarts. So I'm gonna take my fluid here, and we're gonna pour it into my funnel. Pour that into there, so that's the first 2 quarts. I'm just going to fast forward through the rest of this procedure where I continue to take 2 quarts from the drain basin and pour it into these containers, you know, making sure that I accurately measure the amount of fluid that came out of the truck. I'm going to do this 4 times, so it'll end up with 8 quarts and 4 ounces that I have taken out of the truck. Now there was some that was waste, so I'm expecting to put in a little bit more than 8 quarts and 4 ounces. Oops, I might have to shut this off here. That's the nice thing about this little valve here, is if I put too much in, yeah, and I think I did, I don't want to overfill that. So I'll put that here. We got this last little bit here. Let's see how much that is. Looks like I got 4 ounces here. So I get 8 quarts plus 4 ounces, and I'll let this drain into there. And now we're ready to put this right into the dipstick tube and fill our new fluid in. So we got to put in 8 quarts plus 4 ounces. And let's see how much comes in here. 1 gallon, which is 1 US gallon, which is 4 quarts. And so we're going to put 2 of these jugs in there, and then we'll start her up and go through the whole procedure before we go on from there. Then we come up to the dipstick tube. Of course, this is going to be completely dry right now. I'm going to put my funnel, which fits nicely right in there like that. What I think I'm going to do is get right up here into the truck and start pouring my fluid back in there. It says Mopar ASRC ATF only. ASRC ATF only. Just make sure putting it in the right place. And we're going to start pouring this in there. So we're going to put in, we're going to put in 1 gallon at a time. Now I'm just fast forwarding through, putting in the first gallon just a little bit at a time into the funnel until I've completely emptied this gallon. The second gallon, might think it's funny that I'm actually sitting in the truck, but I just couldn't figure out a different way of getting to the dipstick without actually sitting inside the truck. Now this is where I'm really going to utilize the feature of this funnel, which is you shut off the valve of the funnel, and then you put the amount you want to put in. Right now we're going to put 4 ounces, which would be right up to that line right there, which is what we took out total. So is that 4 ounces? Let's see. That's 4 ounces right there. Okay, so we got 4 ounces. Then I just rotate this, and then it releases it. Okay. What we're going to do now is run the engine through several cycles until the error code that there's no fluid goes away. And we're going to start it. It hasn't given me an error yet. Okay, let's turn it off. So we're getting a little engine light over here. I'm going to turn it off again. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, that time the engine light didn't come on. That's interesting. That was like, I think, my 4th time. Okay, that's good. Engine light didn't come on that time. Trans temperature's coming up. See if there's any messages. Stored messages, washer fluid. That's it. That's all I got. Okay, let's put it into reverse. And it shifted. I have chocks back there, so it's not going to go anywhere. And I have my... It's going to drive. Seems to shift okay. Neutral. Reverse. Park. Okay, so now I'm going to do, I put it back in reverse again. Take my parking brake off. Make sure you're going to reverse it just a little bit. Reverse it a little bit off my things. I think I just ran over something. Go forward again. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, I'm gonna take it for a little bit of a ride, but so far, no lights on the screen. Let's cross our fingers. Okay, now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna leave the engine running. I'm gonna check the fluid level from the dipstick to see how close I came to where it was before I did the procedure. Okay, now I'm going to check the transmission fluid level with the truck running, see how it is cold. Make sure you have a clean rag handy for checking your fluid. It's a little low cold. It's right at the low, almost at add. I'm gonna add 4 ounces of fluid and see how it works. So I've got 4 ounces of fluid in my little fancy funnel here with the little shutoff valve. So I'm just gonna put this on my dipstick tube, turn the valve, and those 4 ounces will go in there. Okay, now I'm gonna start it back up and let it run for a little bit and see what the fluid level is like. Okay, it's hard to see, but I can see it's just past the hash mark for cold, which is good. So I'll check it again later when it's hot and see if it's in the hot zone. You can see that this is the cold zone and this is the hot zone. Okay, the last thing I need to do is put a little sticker on there when I change the filter, how much I put in, and how much, and when the date and miles that were on it when I did it. I have my sticker here from before where I put, I exchanged the fluid at 30,000 miles. So now I'm gonna clean it up with a little alcohol because these labels do not like to stick on this plastic well. 30,000 mile service where I just exchanged the fluid. The one I just did with the filter and the mileage. I just did my CCV filter and I marked that over here. The big question is, should you do this yourself? Well, personally, if I had money to burn, I would definitely just take it to the dealer and be done with it. But it really aggravated me. The local dealer here in Utah, where I am, Stephen Wade Ram, they were jacking me around the price. First they started at 400, then it was 500, and then it was 650 at least. They weren't even guaranteeing that. They said it might be more depending on labor to have this service done. Now, it ended up costing me, with everything, that's including the filter, the gasket, the fluid itself, and I have extra fluid, and then to buy a bin, because a drain bin, because I didn't have one, and then I got that fancy funnel, which I really like, which was 12 bucks. So altogether, but I'm still under 300 bucks all in for this service instead of 650. I checked my home dealer back in my hometown, and they were $700. So you can save yourself a lot of money. But if you've got money to burn, I say just take it to the dealer and get it done. But definitely stay on schedule for this service. The 30,000, 60,000, 90, keep maintaining, because this is an awesome transmission, but it does need this maintenance. Now, as far as the kind of skills you need to do this, really, I think any DIYer out there can do this. It's really not that tough. I have been doing transmission fluid service on all my vehicles for years. I actually have a couple of videos on my home channel that I've actually done really good, because I'm showing basically just fluid exchange. But if you are handy, you like working with cars, definitely take this project on. But make sure you do all your research first. Don't just watch this video, watch a bunch of videos, read blogs, get the RAM manual. Really do your research. You want to make sure you use all the correct torque values, make sure you follow the right procedure, but it's definitely a job that any DIYer can do and save themselves a few $100s. It does take a little bit of planning, and it took me about 3 hours to do this job. Now, I am doing it with 2 cameras under the RV. You know, there is a lot of time involved in just messing with my cameras and the lighting. So I think that if just a regular guy was doing it and not having to film it, I think you could do it in a couple of hours. Now, the hardest part of this project is getting to those 4 back bolts that are behind the cross member going under the truck. It kind of goes underneath the transmission there. There's little gaps they've given you to get to those bolts, but they're at an angle. And I showed in this video how to use a little plastic tube to, you know, remove the bolts and to put them back in easily. But that is really the only hard part. There's the 20 bolts that hold the pan on, the drain bolt, and the 3 bolts that attach the filter inside the transmission. And it's really a pretty easy job. Have you done this transmission service on your Ram with the Aisin transmission? Please share your experience in the comment section down below with everyone else that's considering doing this job. I know I was a little apprehensive about doing it, but having the dealer screw with me really is what pushed me to do it myself, and I'm glad I did. Now, if you like videos like this, I will leave a playlist right over here, some more of our RV DIY videos and some more Ram projects that I've got coming up, like changing my CCV filter. If you like this kind of content and want to see more, please consider subscribing by clicking the link right down there. And remember, downsizing does make sense.